This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
From the Asian Community Development Council, this is Family in Focus, Mondays at 12 noon on PHLV Radio.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome back to Family in Focus. I'm back in the studio here at PHLV, right here in Las Vegas, Nevada, broadcasting live to all of you out there tuning into this show on this Monday. And this is a really kind of interesting show. And for me, as a former full-time journalist, I'm really kind of impassioned about the subject we're talking about today. And I have some great guests to talk about this, the importance of ethnic media, especially as the diversity of country just keeps growing, including right here in Nevada as well. So first, let me introduce you to my guest today. We have a correspondent, a TV news correspondent from ABSCBN, Bev Lorente, is joining us live from Las Vegas. Hi, Bev. Good to have you. First time on this show. Great to have you with us today. We also have Robert Macabagdal. He is the general manager of the Las Vegas Asian Journal, joining us live from his office here in Las Vegas as well. And joining us from Seattle, we have the editor-in-chief of International Examiner, Jill Wasberg. Thank you so much for joining us here. So it's definitely an issue that is not just here in Nevada, but all across the country. We're seeing more and more people, living in this country who are identify as non-white. And I just want to kind of bring up some stats to start out this conversation. According to the latest census, which just came out a week ago or so, they said the number of Americans who identify as white has actually fallen below 60% for the first time ever. And the population growth driven by ethnic minorities just grown up. And we're talking about Asian American population specifically here. They actually went up by 35% since the last census to 24 million, making Asian and Pacific Islanders the fastest growing segment of the U.S. population. So just seeing those numbers, you just see, not just Asian Americans, obviously, ethnic minorities are, just growing in this country. And that's why we're talking about me as a former full-time journalist. I've worked in mainstream media for over 20 years. So I know that, sometimes it can be a challenge, for mainstream media covering so many stories out there right now to kind of target in on specific ethnic populations. That's why it's so important to have all these publications and outlets out there that target. And we're going to talk a little bit more about our guests here. So first, let me start with Bev. And Bev, tell me a little bit about what you do and ABSCBN. For people who are not familiar, talk to us about your outlet.
ABS-CBN is one of the leading Philippines' leading broadcast network in the Philippines. So we stream and we broadcast in 7 continents of the world. Where there's a Filipino, there's the TFC. We call it the Filipino channel. So ABS-CBN News Network is the mothership of the TFC, which is the Filipino channel that is here in the United States. So they always say that if you have a TFC in your home, that means you are a Filipino.
That's right. Yeah, and you're based here in Las Vegas, but you cover news all over the Pacific Northwest right now, right?
Yes, I do. And recently I got the assignment in the Pacific Northwest and the Seattle area, Portland, Oregon. So it's the Alaska area. There's a lot. There's the population. Filipino population in Seattle is almost 200,000. It's almost 200,000 Filipinos. And here in Las Vegas, we are the second largest minority next to the Latinos. So it's big. So
it's so important, and I think to have you and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. But obviously, some of the challenges you face. I mean, apparently with political and the station shutting down and all that, and that has affected your work here as well.
Yes, well, we have 11,000 employees in the Philippines who lost their job because of the shutdown that was, I should say, unnecessary to get unsolicited opinion. But most of those members who voted the network to be shut down was under the allies of the current president of the Philippines, who is not too fond of the critique of our station. alleged critique of our station. So that's what happens. But we continue to rise to the occasion. We continue to broadcast in the United States and all over the world, Australia, Africa, Middle East, where there's a lot of Filipino overseas contract workers. So we basically still broadcasting in the service of the Filipinos worldwide.
Yeah, no, and we'll talk about that a little more about, what you're getting out there and the importance of having, that kind of voice, not just here in the U.S., but all around the world. Let me bring Robert into the conversation. I call him Bobby. I know him as Bobby.
Yeah, everybody knows me as Bobby.
So I'll call you Bobby. So Bobby, talk to us a little bit about the Las Vegas Asian Journal. You've been around here in this town for quite a while now.
Yeah, I moved here officially in 1999, but we have been open here in Las Vegas since 1995. Asian Journal started in Los Angeles in 1991, and then we opened up Las Vegas in 95. And we have Northern California Asian Journal, which covers San Jose to Sacramento, and then Las Vegas, which basically covers Clark County. And then we have New York, New Jersey Asian Journal, which covers the tri-state, New York, New Jersey, and parts of Connecticut. And as of October last year, we picked up San Diego Asian Journal. So we are in those cities right now. Predominantly, even though it's Asian Journal, we predominantly target the Fil-Am community, and that's our reach of market, because with the Filipinos being the largest AAPIs in majority of the cities that we service, we think that the newspaper is still being picked up, and we still have readers and advertisers who do target the Filipinos in this country.
And it's not just Filipino, because I know that just from your content, I know Filipinos are a big part, but you cover other Asian American Pacific Islander stories as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Especially here in Las Vegas, where it's a true melting pot, because not like in other cities where there are certain districts there could be Chinatown, Koreatown. Here, basically, we are all compromised. Of all the Asian minorities are all gathering, and not just in Chinatown now, because there's no such thing to me. I'm being specification locally in individuals here, because if you go down Rainbow Boulevard, north and south, it's Asian restaurants, markets now. And so there's no place in this town where you can go where you can't see Asians signs, restaurants, businesses, with Asian names on it. So to me, I feel proud when I see that.
Yeah, no, and we're really diverse here. And I think you may have seen the latest reports that come out according to the census that Nevada is now the third state after Hawaii and California to be, the most diverse, and Asian American.
I'm going to send here a link on the chat, please. While I was researching it, right there in Clark County, the fourth largest origin groups are 50% Filipino, 12% Chinese, Native Hawaiians. And this is from the Nevada Independent prior to the official census being released. So, so this could be more than that from what
And I believe it. I mean, just living here, you see, and I know Bobby was mentioning, Chinatown along the Spring Mountain corridor. We don't really even want to call it Chinatown anymore, because it's really very international, right? We see Thai businesses, we see Chinese, we see Vietnamese, we see all kinds, Filipinos up and down Spring Mountain corridor. So we call it kind of like the Spring Mountain International Asian American Pacific Island corridor. So, one person that we need to actually get to Las Vegas is Jill Wasberg, who she said she has not been to Las Vegas in about 20 years. And, trust me, in those 20 years, Jill, this city has changed a lot. And having more Asian American Pacific Islanders is definitely part of it. Jill, welcome. I know you're joining us from, Seattle, Washington area. Talk to us a little bit about the International Examiner, because like Bev and Bobby, your publications and your outlet really kind of focus the ethnic minorities, right?
Yeah. So the International Examiner has been around since 1974, founded in Seattle's Chinatown International District. Before it was called the International District, it used to be just called Chinatown, and now it's both of them. And it really was formed in response to the stories of Chinatown not being told accurately through mainstream media. It was a neighborhood that was viewed as riddled with crime and poverty and neglect, and there were a group of activists in the 70s that took hold of that narrative and created their own newspaper. And honestly, to this day, it's still that. We print still, so we print 2 newspapers a month. We're bi-weekly, and we update our website almost every day with stories that we feel like are told through the lens of the community itself and the writers itself, not through mainstream media. And that's pretty much our goal. And since then, of course, there have been Asian populations that have grown and communities that have grown outside of Chinatown International District in large enclaves. And so we strive to cover that. It's a little difficult with our size, which I'm sure people can identify with, but we do what we can.
Yeah, and I know this well. When I was working as a TV news reporter and anchor in Seattle, International Examiner was one of those publications that, as a mainstream journalist, but someone with Asian American, background, I lean to, as a resource and as story ideas, because I do want to make sure that I cover my community that's not just white, right? And obviously we're seeing the numbers definitely growing in diversity. And Jill, and talk to me a little bit about that, Jill. I mean, obviously it's a small size, but how do you kind of face on those challenges and kind of cover as much as possible? What are you doing right now to make International Examiner just kind of as robust as you can?
Everything we can.
Yeah.
But I think, relying on our community a lot. People who have invested in the International Examiner for a long time. We've got these longtime board members. We've got editors, from years past, and also people who just care about the International District and Asian Pacific Islander communities in general. They're very vocal and give us input and give us feedback on what we should be covering, and that's everything. That means everything to us.
Yeah, no, and I know you're serving that community well, and for so long. And and Bev, let me bring you into the picture here. I knew you were just up in Seattle just this past week to talk to me about, because you're covering the Pacific Northwest now, because you're trying to get the stories out, especially about the Filipino American population who are now kind of all over. And you said Seattle now over 200,000, right?
It's actually close to 200,000. It's more than 178,000 Filipino Americans are now living in the Washington state. And the majority of the population in that area are, in the healthcare industry and the casino, some in the casino industry, but agricultural industry. So a lot of them feel that they're always hungry for the news of what's going on in the Philippines. They're always longing for that breaking news of what's going on in their town, in their province. So Filipino channel, ABSCBN News, even if we were shut down in the Philippines, we continue to thrive with stories that really matters to our audience, which is the Filipino Americans. And a lot of the subscribers are in the Pacific Northwest, because they are the caregivers, they are the nurses, they are the retirees who chose Seattle as their retirement haven.
Right.
So it's just one of those facets in life that they just want to be updated. They just wanted to know what's in the news, what's in the Philippines, especially during the COVID.
Right.
The COVID days. I was just
saying that, especially now, and my own family is in Thailand, and it's hard for us to go back and see them, and so I feel like ethnic media is just even more important now, because you're that connection, right, between people who can't make it into their home country right now, just trying to get all the news of what's happening, especially with something like COVID.
Yeah, it's the easy access, it's the accessibility to the information that they want to know or they need to know, because that is what's going on. The law, what is the regulation for the balikbayans? Balikbayans means that, Filipinos from the United States coming back to the Philippines, they're called balikbayans. What are the protocols to be on the quarantine? You have to be in the quarantine for 14 days. You have to go through with all of the COVID protocols that is imposed by the Philippine government. So like me, I recently lost my mom 2 months, June 20. We couldn't go home because of the COVID protocols in the Philippines. 14 days quarantine or 10 days quarantine is
It's tough. I know. That's why I'm still here. That's why I haven't visited my family either. So I get it. And I'm so sorry to hear that about your mom. But I think you're speaking for so many, not just in the Filipino American population, but Asian American who's feeling kind of helpless right now. Right. They need to kind of get as much information as they can.
Yes. And as a journalist, it's your job to be relevant to them in the same way that you are giving them the most accurate information that you can get.
Right.
And in the same way, you have to be neutral in the sense that the government does not go back to you and tell you accuse you of being biased.
Right.
That's the proper term for, especially you're representing ABS-CBN.
Yeah.
And it's really sad, especially for the brothers and sisters of my coworkers in the ABS-CBN News, from the cameraman to the producers to the janitors, being shut down and being the largest broadcast network in the country. It's really a major blow against the news media, that if a president of a country can do that to you.
And you know what, Bev, it's just so sad to hear, and I've been following that kind of on and off. But I think, just talking about media in general now, even just working in the mainstream media, just in the last, 5-6 years, we've known that term fake news, that term, like journalists, mainstream journalists are even being attacked for just, people accusing us of not being factual, of spreading propaganda. Robert, let me bring you in here. I mean, you live and work here in Las Vegas, and I know this past year and a half, with this COVID kind of taking over. Tell me, we've heard stories, and you've done stories on how the Asian American community was affected, and that importance of getting factual information out there to the community, how that kind of became even more nuanced for you just in this past couple of years.
Oh, definitely. It has been, due to the fact, with social media, not vetting information is dangerous. With what's happening, with what happened with treatment, with the proper distancing or social guidelines, it showed us where a little bit of information that's where, there is such thing as fake news, but it's not with the mainstream media. It's mostly on these people spreading information, pretending, captioning. Sometimes, they'll use the background of a real media, and then they'll put some edited text on it, or they'll re-quote it to change to fit it to their narrative. That's fake news, because we've actually killed stories or held on to a story because we want to make sure that the information that we have is true. So it might not make it to our newspaper, but we'll put it into our website just to make sure we're putting on the proper and correct news. We actually vet our news. I'm proud to say that we do that. All our reporters do that. They're not allowed to post anything without it being vetted, due to the fact that we don't want to be part of fake news. Because even when November 8th, when President-elect Biden then was officially announced, we had to publish it, and then it was several. We waited for several other sources, prominent sources, make sure that they called it on that day. Then that's when we put it on our website and our social media page. Hey, President-elect Biden, and we were still getting, hey, fake news. And well, like, no, we vetted our stories, and then when we actually went to print, people are saying, hey, this is not true. I go, like, no, we vetted these stories. So we got to be careful when people are saying what fake news is, because I think social media, as great as it is, it's the scariest and dangerous thing too right now, in my opinion.
And journalists use social media too. And I've seen journalists who, had to pull back a quote or anything because they're putting information out there, sometimes breaking news that turn out not to be factual, So I think we all have to be careful, even as journalists. And Jill, I know, especially when it comes to discrimination and violence against the Asian American population, especially the elderly, you've seen quite a number of those stories, right, in the Pacific Northwest. And that's just really sad to see. But it's so important to also get those stories out there in the news.
Yeah, we're trying our best. I think what we're trying to do from our angle is we're trying to tell stories of resilience, and so it can't always be all these people, like all the Asian Americans and Asians are being beat up, and especially elders, it's really hard to see, but we're trying to find a way to show resilience through that. And that's just part of the neighborhood that we represent. This neighborhood again and again has seen itself being like kind of decimated or on the chopping block for things. And as always, it just sticks up for itself. And we saw that we're seeing this right now, you know, communities coming up with community-based solutions as opposed to relying on government funding or anything like that. This community knows how to get it done. So through neighborhood watch groups and things like that, we're trying to show that story of it, because that's always what we've had to do.
Yeah, no, and there's such a history behind that, right? The fact that, you know, we see, you know, stories targeting Asian American or about them, but it's really not for them, right? Like we're seeing content that's about Asian American population, but are you really going into the community and listening what they have to say, how they're kind of rising above, which I think it's great to see, you know, with the Asian American community, Asian Community Development Council, you know, we've talked to actually the people behind NextChark, you know, and I've talked with them and how they say that, yeah, it's important to put all these stories out there, as Joe was saying, that, you know, the factual stories, but also the good stories, you know, the good stories, the things that we're doing in the community to kind of rise above, and the positive stories and how we're resilient. And I think that, you know, maybe mainstream media doesn't always have the time and the space, right? Or even the attention or wanting to do these stories, but we can. And I know, Jill, you're saying that's one of your priorities is to showcase those stories, right?
Right. And also the trust, like the mainstream media doesn't have the trust. And so they'll go out and find sources, and that's great. I'm not like knocking them on that, but I think our writers and our intent is to go out and find people that trust us, and they can tell their stories, and they feel safe talking to media in a trusted manner. And
you bring up a really good point. And Bev, let me bring you in here. Just, you know, you're broadcasting to Filipino population, not just American, all over the world. But it's just the fact that they are tuning in because of that trust, right? Because they're seeing you, they're seeing other reporters who are Filipinos, and you know, you're an Asian American. You kind of understand that community.
We're always the go-to. It's always the resources, the credibility of the resources, that if it's from ABSCBN, it's true. If it's a breaking news from the ABS-CBN News Network, it's true. Because the time and time have been there since the 70s and the 80s, and we've been broadcasting. So it becomes, the network ABS-CBN becomes an institution to the many generations from the 60s, 70s, 80s. We've been there. So it is also, again, it's an access to the community that the mainstream media doesn't pay attention. For instance, being relevant, Filipino teachers, Filipino nurses in Nevada, because the shortage of teachers in Nevada was a big issue in the Clark County School District. So they hired Filipino J1 teachers from the Philippines to be brought to the United States and work as a professional teachers. Right. That was a big help to Nevada, and also to other states who has a shortage of teachers, nurses. Philippines was the breeding ground for healthcare workers ever since the 60s, the 70s, the 50s. It's just a huge migrant group, diaspora of Filipino nurses who are now healthcare heroes, right? So to speak. You know, the recent physician was the recent Barbie doll. What do you call it? I'm sorry,
Filipino doctor. Yeah.
Filipino doctor was a Barbie from Filipinay Barbie doctor. Yeah. And so I was the first one to interview her. The mainstream media was only the focal point of the mainstream media was all about her. It wasn't about the Filipino roots. What city did the family came from? Who was the parents? You know, growing up, I always stay outside of the box, of the thinking box, and just give the audience what they want. Well, you know, what will put a wrinkle to their brain.
Well, I think what you're kind of talking about there is adding more nuance, right? You're adding more of context to the story that, you know, people may be watching mainstream media, they're just seeing kind of as a superficial, but you're giving kind of the insights that if you're not Asian American or if you're not, you know, from a particular group, part of that group. You don't see that there is such diversity. And as Bobby, you were saying earlier, there's such a diversity, especially in Nevada now, when you're talking about, especially we were talking about election story, for example, talking about Asian American voters. Bobby, you covered this during this last election, that people in the Asian American population here, they don't even vote the same way, right? I mean, there are people in Vietnamese communities who both are Democrats and Republicans. So we're not all the same when it comes to the group.
Especially with the Filipino, it's a true toss-up. Like one cycle can be red, one cycle can be blue. That's why we call Nevada purple, because we do swing. Majority of the AAPIs will swing on a candidate and no particular candidate, because it was during this 2020 was very weird due to the fact that prior to the shutdown, there were still live in-person gatherings. We would go. A majority of the candidates visited us here, in the AAPI in the Chinatown district, or they would meet us some organizations events or at some community hall. In fact, like Vice President Biden went to Harbor Palace, twice there, and he had his events there. So it was good to see that reaching out to the community. Then the good thing was when I was talking to the national poll reporters that were following them, basically I was asking them, how would you guys portray this story of a candidate going to a specifically Asian community? It's the difference coverage between ours. We will specify, we highlighted when they would bring up AAPI subjects too. So it's not, because as you work in the local station here and the national media, mainstream media, as you said, your 30-second blip on that story can be 2 to 3 minutes on an ethnic media, or a full story, a full page story for us in the newspaper, instead of being a blip or President Biden attended this event in Chinatown. That's it. For us, it will be the whole story. The people that were there will actually interview all the people that were there, or you will even interview the pros and the cons, the pro Biden we'll interview both sides, so we get to the fact that what their feelings are. So instead of being a blip, it's a true story on that event.
Yeah, no, and that's why, whenever I see Bobby out there covering stories, I know we're going to get the Asian American perspective, and I love that. I love that we have those resources here. And I know we just have a few minutes left here, but Jill, just talk to me about the challenge. We wanted to just talk about challenges a little bit, because when it comes to a lot of times with ethnic media, funding is a big issue, right? Getting people to kind of back us and to see that we're out there and giving us the access. What do you see kind of like the biggest challenge for you right now, and how can we help each other? I mean, in terms of, is it better to work with mainstream? Because we want to have that relationship with mainstream media as well, right? I think that relationship helps. I'm not going to say love-hate. I'm going to say it's a appreciate, resentful relationship with mainstream media, because definitely when we see them covering the issues that affect our community, we're like, oh, it's reaching a broader audience. But at the same time, we've been talking about that, and nobody cared when we talked about it. Until something really bad happens, or something, and that becomes like a national issue. Right. And so when we've been doing this for literally for 45 or 47 years, and then all of a sudden we see it covered in mainstream media, and people are like, oh, it's on their radar for 3 seconds or whatever. But for us, it's our lived experience every single day. Whether we live or work in that neighborhood or community. So I don't, short of just recognizing that, and that we do know how to take care of ourselves, but at the same time, trust us to know what we're doing. So please give us general operating support. We're a nonprofit, so we can ask for that. But in terms of funding, that's my number one ask. Yeah, no, and I think it's great that you're getting out there and getting the community to know more about the International Examiner and what you do, and same with ABSCBN and Las Vegas Asian Journal. I think, having a platform that gets your community the voice that they deserve. And as Jill was saying, it's not just when big stories happen or something really bad happens, everyday basis, right? I mean, our communities are out there just trying to make it through the same things as anyone in terms of COVID-19 or the economy or whatever. So let me just give you guys just a few more minutes, just a few minutes, just say, what do you want to say to your community that you cover and kind of what do you see ahead now for the future of ethnic media? And Bev, I'll have you start.
Okay. Well, ABS-CBN News, the Filipino channel, we are here to stay. Mm-hmm. We don't why away, and we will continue to serve. And as the tagline says, in the service of the Filipinos worldwide. That's
great. And how about you, Bobby?
Yeah, please, as you said, this topic here is like support us. Because we are a free publication, everything is through advertising revenue. So that's why I'm glad it's picking up again, and that's little by little. But I appreciate those who do still pick up the newspaper or go to our website and just to catch up on the fresh news story with the Asian Journal.
That's great, thank you. And Jill, finally to you.
I'm super appreciative of people who pick up our paper as well. We're still in print and advertising as well, and also just I'm astounded on a daily basis, especially going through this pandemic and this news cycle, of how this community that I represent through the news has made it happen. It's incredible on a daily basis. I'm inspired.
That's great. Well, you guys are all very inspiring, and I'm so thankful to have all of you working so hard every day, getting the voices out of the Asian American Pacific Islander community, one that is growing so fast in this country and really deserve, just with the number of people to have our voices heard every day. And you guys are doing a very big part in that. So thank you again to Bev Lorente with ABS-CBN.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Bobby, from the Las Vegas Asian Journal. And from Jill Westberg as well, International Examiner in Seattle. But you can obviously, with the digital world, you can have access to all of their work every day online, so definitely support them and support ethnic media. I think we have a big part in raising voices all over the country. So thank you again for watching this episode of Family in Focus, presented by the Asian Community Development Council, and we'll be back next Monday. Have a great day.